Hello and welcome to the What If We Think Differently podcast. My name is Nonsigele Lonzula and here we reimagine our realities. Today I'm joined by an incredible team of people that we're going to have a discussion with. And we are going to be talking about one of our centers, which is called Civic Engagement here at CVO Institute. And welcome, guys. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
It's just a discussion that we're going to have this morning, and we are looking at what we call the African Citizens Watch. And I'm going to act like I've never met this thing before. I don't know what it is. I don't know what kind of animal it is. And you guys are going to walk me through that. Is that okay? So, Matron, I'm going to start with you because I understand that the African Citizens Watch started in Zimbabwe. What is the African Citizens Watch?
Thank you for having me, Nonsi. I'm Matron Michena, country researcher for Zimbabwe. So the African Citizens Watch is an independent platform that tracks performance and effectiveness of African governments. It is based on the pledges made in manifestos that are made by governments during elections and then after elections. So we are saying at CVO, we believe that democracy doesn't end at the ballot box. We say what happens after elections, day one after elections. So the African Citizens Watch now tracks the performance of what the government is doing since day one of them getting in office. We started in Zimbabwe and then we expanded into the region with Malawi, Zambia, Botswana, South Africa, and Zambia.
So when did you start in Zimbabwe?
We started in 2018. We were looking at the then government, which had promises up to 248 in their electoral manifesto.
248 promises?
Yes.
Okay, I'm tempted to just ask you, how did that go? How many of those promises were fulfilled?
In that cycle, a lot of them were fulfilled. About 166 were completed, implemented, and then some were left in progress. But knowing that the government still had the second term of office, we are still tracking the government currently.
All right, so that was Matron who was telling us about Zimbabwe, but I'd like just to take a moment for everyone to just introduce themselves. We have people from Zambia, Botswana, and South Africa. So I will start with you, ladies first.
Thank you so much, Nancy. My name is Yelokazi Mfuto. I am from South Africa in Pretoria, and I track South African government.
Right. Zambia.
Okay, Matao Molife is my name. I track the Zambian government, the UPND government. Yeah.
All right. And
good morning, Nancy and the team. I'm Mukaloba from Botswana. So goes without saying, I'm the tracker for Botswana.
all right, lovely. Now that we have an understanding of what the tracker does, I'm going to move on to say, what does it track? I know that Zimbabwe has kind of a peculiar way of tracking compared to the other countries. So I'll throw that question first to another country researcher, and I'll come back to you, Matron, and you can tell us what the difference is with your tracker. So, Makoloba, can you tell us what you track? What does your tracker look at?
Yeah, thank you once again. In Botswana, maybe just a brief of a background. Remember last year around November, we had a new government, change of government after almost 50 years of the same party. So that's when Botswana now got into this tracker. And this new Umbrella for Democratic Change government had a manifesto, a very rich manifesto from which we managed to extract about 179 promises. And those promises are spread into 5 areas. The first area is the economy, there's governance, there's corruption, there's social services, and then there's climate change. So those promises are spread across all those areas. And ever since day one of that particular government in office until their very last day, which was the next elections, we are tracking almost every aspect of it.
All right, great. So I just want us to carry our viewers with us. So we said we're going to look at the economy, governance, climate change, social services, and what did I miss? Corruption. All right, great. Is that the same for your countries as well? And you are looking at the manifesto from the political parties that are currently in power.
Slightly different in South Africa. So, for instance, the ANC lost its majority in last year's elections. So now we're tracking using the opening of parliament statement, which is known as SONA, State of the Nation Address, and then the government subsequently released a medium-term development goal, where we extracted more promises. Now we have about 121 coming from these documents. Remember, now it's not a majority party; it's a government of national unity. Grand coalition of sorts, as some people call it, but slightly different from us, and the actions are 121.
121, okay, great. And Molefe, how is that for you?
Yeah, so for Zambia, we are tracking using based on the manifesto, the United Party for National Development manifesto. Of course, during the campaigns, the elections in 2021, the party had also what they called the 10 points plan, which of course most of the 10 points in that plan actually sink into the 248 promises that were able to extract from the party manifesto.
All right, great. Yeah. So as you have spoken about the different aspects that you get your promises from, does that change as the years go by, as the tenure continues, or do you just stick to the ones that you found in the manifesto? And I'll throw that question to you, Matron.
Okay, so we do check from the manifesto, but we also say we get promises from important policy pronouncements. So in the government, as they lead, they can find something along the way and they just decide to go with it. They can be in other external challenges that can influence the promises that are already there, and they can make a pronouncement to say we are going to track this. So we add other important pronouncements into the manifesto.
So let's talk a bit about Zimbabwe. You said that Zimbabwe is slightly different from the three countries that have gotten their promises from the manifesto. Zimbabwe's political party, the current ruling government, does not or did not have a manifesto. So what are you tracking exactly?
Yeah, so for Zimbabwe, this time around the second term of office, they decided not to publish a manifesto, but they say they are a citizen-centric government. So they are working towards that. So we decided to track them using their National Development Strategy, which is a strategy document of a 5-year term from 2021 to 2025.
Okay.
So we took the commitments there from the National Development Strategy, which are 248. They are categorized around 4 priority areas. So it's also different from the other countries. There are similarities. So for Zimbabwe, we are tracking economy, governance, social service, and rural development.
All right, so you have rural development and your other countries don't have rural development.
It's included as part of governance and economy.
Oh, okay. And for Zimbabwe, it's separate.
Yes, it's separate.
Why is that so?
I think it's also because in the National Development Strategy that they specifically talked about rural development, okay. So towards an inclusive society, and they're also looking at including the rural communities.
All right, lovely. So let's talk about the different aspects of what tracking has been like for the different countries. I'd like to assume that there are similarities, things that you found that like cut across all the countries, and then there are things that are either peculiar to South Africa, to Botswana, or Zimbabwe. And I want to start with you, Lokwazi. What have you found that is peculiar to South Africa in your tracking?
Well, the tracking itself is quite an interesting tool that has been introduced. And in South Africa, we are, of course, we pride ourselves with our beautiful history and democracy and public institutions, our media that has so much freedom. But oftentimes, the reporting of government's actions or what they've done is sometimes biased based on what you think of government, right? Sometimes it's just like they didn't do anything, or they're not doing well at all, or they're doing great, right? Depending on where you come from. But now what we've found is that actually sometimes empirical evidence is important, because when you want to inform citizens, you also empower them, right? So currently now we have about 121 actions, 27 of them have been in progress. And when we speak about this, you're representing government, but also at the same time, this is the work that is done by government. So you want to be able for people to be able to track when they go to the next election, they know what have happened and what has been done and what has not been done. So what's peculiar in South Africa right now is the fact that with the GNU, Government of National Unity, we saw that government is doing some work, but sometimes government does not get enough media coverage, right, in terms of, oh, this has been done, like the investment in infrastructure. And we've seen work that has been done, but it's not covered enough on the news. And secondly, now with the new policies that have been introduced, they had a backlash internationally, Appropriations Act policy, the Bella Bill, the NHI. So those are the things that we want to empower citizens with, that these things are happening, and it's up to you to actually believe them or actually critique them, because when you have information, you're empowered.
All right, great. And I'll move on to you, Malefa. What is peculiar about Zambia and your tracking experience?
Well, peculiar to Zambia is the fact that there has been so much activity around the economy. Yeah, and you discover there's also very little around issues to do with governance, and also issues to do with the corruption aspect. And of course, when you look at the economy, based on the tracking that we have done, you see that most of the things that were promised are being implemented, of course, with most of them being at a state of in progress. Yeah, because some of these, most of them are long-term initiatives that the Zambian government has been implementing. And of course, with a note that the debt restructuring so far has been going on well. Unfortunately, the promise on prudent expenditure and also borrowing seems to be falling apart. Yeah, because of the fact that there has been debt restructuring on the other side, but on the other side, the debt keeps increasing.
Rising,
So there is that mismatch in terms of policy direction for the current government.
All right, that is quite interesting. I'm going to come to you.
Yeah. Thank you once again. With Botswana, one thing that stands out about Botswana is, of all what we are tracking so far, is probably the youngest government, because we are the UDC government is just 9 months into power. And then most interesting is if you look into the 179 promises, a good number of them fall under social services. And that is where so far government has been trying to get most of its limited resources towards. And the reason why I'm saying limited resources is it's very important for context, because remember, as a country, we are going through some financial slump. There is a lot of challenges. Our major stay of the economy being diamonds is not selling. So you find out that yes, there are promises in other areas, but the promises actually now, some are being modified with government justifying that with the shortage of resources. And generally, looking at the number of promises that was made, you can pick two things. One, the pace is very slow, because as of now, there's only about 14 promises that are actually in progress out of 179. And then you took a deep dive again, secondly, into many promises. You remember those promises were made by the party that was then opposition. So sometimes you look at them, some of them in 5 years, not to predict anything, but some of them is going to be very, very difficult to have them implemented if as of now they've not been started. Because some of them we are tracking major projects, especially under the economic aspect.
All right, lovely. Matron, can you tell us about Zimbabwe? What is special or peculiar about your tracking?
I think what stood out for Zimbabwe is their effort in economy. I think they are huge on infrastructure development. This government is a history of starting up stored projects. So, for example, they've been the dam story for Zimbabwe. I think some dating back to 1980, where they were just introduced, but they did not get to conclusion. But this government, for now, has completed about 12 dams. Which have been stored for quite a long time. They've also worked on road rehabilitation, I think for the past 5 years into this term of office. They've done more than 50,000 kilometers of road rehabilitation. That has been there. Some new roads. One of them is the Harare to Masvingo Road, which now has the first ever interchange roundabout on it. So they're big on infrastructure development.
All right, so just to sum up what I've heard so far, it sounds, I'll use one word. It sounds like social services here. It sounds like infrastructure here, economy there, economy there. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah? Yes. And what would be the second step? Like, what else are you finding or learning from what you've covered so far? And I'll go again, starting with you, Yologazi, from your end. So after economy, what comes next?
One thing I've realized that as we are tracking across the region, there are so many similarities, right, with these countries. And particularly, we have one history, we have liberation movements leading governments. And also we have a history of colonization in South Africa, apartheid, and so on and so forth. So our focus tends to be the economy. We want to empower people, want citizens to have job creation or employment or sort of things. So we have similarities with regards to economy, but also social services. We believe in the upliftment of people having healthcare, access to education, access to roads, and so on and so forth. So the similarities that we have in the region, they show that democracies probably, they do work, and also citizens, they want tangible things, they want change of lives, they want to see themselves having social mobility. So this is what I'm picking up from the region. It's not only a South African issue, it's a Botswana issue, it's a Zimbabwean issue, that people want pretty much the same things.
Yeah. It's an interesting discussion to have, because then you, in my mind, and I stand to be corrected by the incredible minds that I have here, is that social services cannot take off without a working economy. So I'm wondering, because one of the aspects that you mentioned with Botswana is that you are going through a rough patch in regards to your economy, and especially because it's dependent on diamonds, right? So I'm curious to know how your government plans to focus on social services, considering this other aspect of the economy.
Definitely. It's a challenge that is very evident on the ground right now, because the economy is not doing well. But if you look at some of the promises that was made towards health, towards education, you actually even promised to increase old age pensions, but some of them were actually now readjusted to say, no, we had promised you to adjust old age pension from 800 to 1.8. But when the time came to do that, they were like, oh, the economy is not doing well, so we can only afford 1.4. The other one, I remember students, the government was very clear in its manifesto to say, we are going to increase tertiary students' allowances from the now 1.9 to 2.5. Now, as we speak, it's a very topical issue in Botswana, because now that balancing between resuscitation of the economy and actually being able to provide all the social services, it's a challenge. And interesting enough, it's not just Botswana. I think we can agree that across the region, issues of youth unemployment, issues of dilapidated health and educational facilities and the educational system itself, there are commonalities amongst almost all countries. But now this balancing act between the economic side, which most of the economies are not doing well, against there's so many social promises, it becomes something that will be very interesting. And this is what makes this tracker even more important, even more relevant to the daily lives and the economic lives of both at micro and macro level.
I love that you both of you have touched on a common thread around the region, and that kind of just leapfrogs us into the next part of our discussion that I want us to have, which is the lessons we've learned from tracking. And Matron, I'm going to pick on you, because you started with Zimbabwe, and then you helped all of these people jump on to the wagon as it was moving, right? So can you tell us maybe one or two things that you've learned as you've grown from one country to the next? What have you learned?
I think one of the things that I've learned most importantly is that there's no information out there for people to know that behind those big cars, behind those big offices, there is work being done. Because normally people think they're just there to have money, to look good, and just for themselves. But what data doesn't lie, there's a lot of work that is being done. And across all the countries, there's one focus also that I see, which is a bit lagging behind, but affects all the countries across the globe. So it's climate change. When you look at our manifestos, there are fewer promises towards climate change and in 10 fewer actions. But all the countries are almost struggling about climate change issues. So there's just a tendency of, I don't know, just leaving it behind. But yeah, there is some traction there, but it's a huge gap.
So is that the feeling across the board that climate change kind of takes the back seat in terms of the promises that are made towards it? How many promises are there around climate change in South Africa?
We only have three around climate change, and they speak on just energy transition. And you know very well that South Africa has been hit very hard by climate change with the floods in Eastern Cape and KZN as well. Now it's a matter of reaction. Now there's a disaster management strategies that have to be developed because we did not have foresight in terms of how we tackle climate change. Because if you don't tackle climate change, it translates to economy dilapidation. The mines can't function, people's lives are changed, we can't progress economically. So it's important that also climate change is at the center stage of ensuring that we develop cutting across.
3 out of how many promises again?
121.
All right, Zambia, how are you doing with climate change?
It's a very similar scenario around across the countries that are being tracked. Because when you look at the situation of Zambia, it's also 248 promises, and under climate change you only have 6, which just accounts for about 2% of the total promises. Of course, the government, the UPND government, when they came into power, we see them creating a new ministry called Ministry of Green Economy, of course, and they're saying it's dedicated to implementing green policies, to tackle issues of climate change. But we still see a lagging in terms of policy implementation and enforcing. Of course, a few policies have been developed here and there, but we still see a very big gap in terms of policy implementation. We see there was a ban on charcoal production, but of course, as you drive around Zambia along the main roads, you still see charcoal being sold along the road. People are buying and they're still moving around freely with it. So there is a huge gap in terms of tackling climate issues across the countries.
I'm tempted to delve a little deeper into the issues around climate change, because when you then tell people to stop using an energy tool like charcoal and then there's no alternative, what is the expectation around that? It's just something to think about. But I want to move on to Botswana and ask, is climate change also the same as what we've seen in Zimbabwe, Zambia, South Africa? Is it a major issue or not?
Yeah, it is. But just like in other countries, out of 179 promises from the UDC manifesto, only 6 speak directly to climate change. And unfortunately, out of all of them, there's nothing that comments out of them. There's no progress in all of the 6. And actually, if you look at climate change, I think the biggest problem is it's treated as an alien. Climate change, though, it's in agriculture, it's in our economy, it's everywhere, because this very same climate change is the one that's going to fail your agricultural promises. It's the same one that's going to fail so many of your promises. But unfortunately, there is this trend of treating this. I don't know if whether it's a lack of understanding, even at government's level, of exactly what is this animal called climate change. Because the way it's being treated as a stepchild that's sitting somewhere out there. So that's why even in the promises, it's not really been there. And then the citizenry as well, not very much informed as far as issues of climate change are concerned.
Quite interesting. I was looking at Botswana and at your promises, and I noted that corruption is kind of similar to climate change. Is it because you guys do not have a corruption issue?
I wouldn't necessarily say so. Actually, to dive deep into the tracker, one of the first things that the UDC government did was the body that is responsible for corruption. It's called the Directorate of Economic Crime and Corruption. The first thing that they did was initially it was under the control of the Office of the President. So it was moved, now it reports directly to Parliament. And then secondly, when the UDC came over, there was like high profile corruption cases. And amongst those high profile corruption cases, one was the former permanent secretary to the president. So actually, that's one of the actions, because the UDC promised to say they'll make sure that all those who are liable or who are responsible for corruption will actually be prosecuted. And as we speak, that case has been closed. The former PSP to the president is actually in jail. And so that's something that is mostly unheard of. And then as we speak, the president also launched a national kind of review of the past 5-10 years. There is an external company an auditing firm that has been launched to kind of look into government books, look into government activities, and we're just waiting for the report. We don't know when it will come, but that's something that's ongoing. But I wouldn't say there is no corruption. There is no country without corruption. Sometimes it's just that a country has managed to kind of make manageable corruption, but there is corruption.
I like manageable corruption. All right, great. I know definitely South Africa is going through a season of having to deal with that animal within your country of corruption. And I'm wondering if Zambia and Zimbabwe are kind of facing the same issue around corruption. Are your promises as little as Botswana? Are you in the middle? Where are you? And I will throw that to Wale.
Well, with Zambia around corruption, I think there has been a huge challenge, especially when it comes to issues of prosecuting. So in 2022, we see the creation of the Economic Crimes Court, which is termed a fast-track court. And so what the government is looking at is, can this court handle corruption cases at a faster rate, find closure to most of these cases? However, we see a very big gap in terms of prosecuting.
But what does that look like in terms of your promises around corruption?
Okay, so the promises around corruption...
Dealing with corruption, let me not say me be clear.
So you see that around corruption, there were very few promises that were made around that as well. Yeah, and what we are seeing, there has been so much around the promise of forfeiting. So they're saying, okay, can we get back what was stolen from the Zambian people back to the Zambian people, which has been, of course, a very disappointing process for most Zambians. If you ask most Zambians on the street, I think they'll say, but they're not arresting them, because what the Zambians want to see is, you promise that these people will be jailed. That's why you established the Economic Crimes Court, but you're not jailing any of them. So I think that is a major challenge around the fight against corruption in Zambia.
Lovely. So from the lessons that we've learned, I know we spoke about climate change being something that is not necessarily a priority for the governments, and you can see that being shown in the promises that we are capturing. And the second thing, I jumped into corruption because particularly I had looked at Botswana, and I found that it had very little promises, and I was just wondering how that looked for the rest of the countries. So is there any other lesson, that we've learned from each other that cuts across the board?
Yes, I saw that. So, for instance, African countries, we have the African Union, right? And we have priorities of the African Union. South Africa has a focus on peace and security in the continent, has a promise around the FACTA, the one in Ghana, right? We want to progress in ensuring that we trade amongst each other as Africans. We have promises that speaks to that, but we see the actions. We advance South Africa, US relations, South Africa, Britain relations, and end, right? The European Western countries. So it's very important that when we look into the promises, we also hold the countries accountable to what is the South African relationship with Botswana, with Zimbabwe, with Zambia. Now South Africa fortunately has had a MOU with Lesotho in relation to trade. That is another step in the right direction to ensure that in the promises, we also prioritize Africa's development, because for South Africa to be great, Zimbabwe has to also do well, Zambia has to also do well, so that this tracker does not only focus on South Africa doing great, but can also say, oh, other countries are also doing well because we have empirical evidence of seeing them doing well.
I want to just stay on that word empirical evidence. especially around the tracker, which is something that we didn't discuss when we started and telling people how we track. I know we mentioned we get the promises for the manifesto, but in terms of then checking, was this promise fulfilled or not? How do you get your data to substantiate that for sure? You know, the government did do this, or they haven't done this, or it's in progress. And also just looking, and I know I'll keep picking on Zimbabwe because you use the red, amber, green, and everyone else uses the progress. You will school me on that, right? So, Matron, I'm going to ask you to first look at the different ways that you track the red, amber, green. What is that? And then also tell me about the other countries. What do they use?
Okay. So for Zimbabwe, we are saying we rate the actions against a reg analysis of red, amber, green. So we are saying a green is where all the actions have been fulfilled. The promise has been fully implemented. Then we are saying the red is there's need for attention. Then when we're saying a promise is on orange, there's work that has been done, but I think more energy can be done, can also be channeled towards the fulfillment of that promise. Across all the countries now, we are saying we have in progress, which means there's work that is being done, but we still need to do more in terms of fulfilling that promise. We have a modified category. This is where we are saying maybe initially the government has promised something, but along the way they are saying, I think we need to establish a ministry to deal with this. Then they change the promise. Maybe there's COVID-19 and they say, more resources now need to be channeled towards social service. And now they are modifying that kind of promise. So that's what we call a modified. There's a not commenced at all. That means there's no action that has been done towards implementation of that. And then, of course, there's an implemented promise. This is where everything has been done to fulfill this kind of promise. Now, how do we get to know that it's in progress, it's broken? So we are saying there are government reports that goes in Zimbabwe. Cabinet sits every Tuesday and they produce their meeting reports. Then we check. But we are not just saying, just because we have seen a report on government website, we are recording that as an action. We verify to see, is anyone else talking about that? Maybe Transparency International is saying, your corruption index, the score is here, but government is saying otherwise. So we verify and say, this is the action that we found somewhere, and now where else was it talked about? And we have credible sources like newspaper articles. We have also reports from independent entities like maybe UNICEF. We have maybe Relief Web that talks about the same thing. So we are saying, of course, maybe the government spokesperson have talked about that on their Twitter handle. We are just taking that, looking for any other verifiable source.
So how many sources do you normally get to verify what you found?
We need initial source 1, and then we need 2 other sources.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so we've spoken about this tracker and the beautiful work that it's doing around just bringing to the public and making it available for people to know what their government is doing for them or where they are falling short, right? And we've said that it's backed up by data. We check our facts. So what? That's where we're moving to. So what does that mean? What influence do we want this tracker to have? And I think it might be different for the different countries, but it could be also just a unified agenda that we have for all of them. So I'm going to start with you, and then you can tell us what impact being the wrong word. How would you like your tracker to influence citizens and government?
It is without a doubt that this is the first of a kind in Botswana. We have never had any organization track the actions of government. And this comes with a number of positives. One, we are in a world where literally everything is data driven, everything is research based. Even economies, even the very Botswana government wants to transition to a knowledge based economy. This is the knowledge we are creating, this is the evidence we are creating. Not just we are telling the citizenry to say, this is what your government promised, this is what they are doing, this is what they are not doing. And at the same time, we are coming to government and saying, if at all you need a reminder of what you promised the people, if at all you are a true government that actually even believes on self-introspection and self-reflection, we are giving you a mirror to say, here's a mirror, here's what you promised, here's where you are. If you are a government that is honest with yourself, you can actually even use our tracker to actually even do more, such that tomorrow you can even say, yeah, look guys, when we started we promised this, and this Severe told us this is how far we have gone, and yes, we acknowledge we did good on this area and we'll improve on that. So it's just a true reflection, and I think it cuts across countries, but for Botswana particularly, this is the first of its kind, and that it's from a very independent source. It's not opinion based, it's data based. It's something beautiful.
Oh, lovely. Matron?
I think for me, I would say this should be for informing the citizens. You know, we need to move away from elections and electing people based on personalities, on who's the loudest, who's the smartest. We are saying this is what they've said they would do. Nobody put a gun to their head to promise us, but they did this. And what have they done now? And so just based on that, you've promised this, and what have you done? So now to make an informed decision to say, are we going to vote them based on they've been promising a lot, they've been so beautiful, they are handsome, they are youthful, they are whatnot. But we are saying, what have they done actually? We need the data to hold them accountable to say, of course, now when you're getting into office, you know, there are a lot of people who never know about what a manifesto is. So they don't even vote based on they've promised this. They just vote because, oh, he's the youthist. Well, now we are waiting for them. So we are just saying, we are giving you data, we are giving you evidence of what the governments are doing. So I think it's to inform the citizens to make the right decision.
Right. Is that the same for you, Melissa?
Yes, beyond elections, of course, at Civil we believe that democracy is beyond the elections. And so the objective of the tracker is really to provide evidence for citizens and non-state actors to actually be able to engage the government where organizations can go to the government and say, look, you promised this, and so far from our tracker, you actually haven't done anything around this space. What's going on? They should be able to ask questions based on evidence, unlike just coming with sweeping statements to say you didn't do this or you've done this and so on and so forth. So it's there to enhance evidence-based participation and engagement by both citizens and non-state actors.
All right. Yologazi, what are your thoughts?
Well, the tracker is quite useful because particularly we track in countries that practice democracy. One of the pillars of democracy, one is elections, but elections is not a one-day event, as Matron did say. So it's quite important that when people demand or want accountability, they do that with an informed position, right? Because now we run the risk, particularly in South Africa, politics are polarized. It's either you hate the government or you like the government. There's no in between. And sometimes people do not necessarily have the requisite data to back up their statements, right? So this is a position where we give people information, we empower them so that when they demand accountability, particularly people who are non-government actors, they can go and say, you have promised this thing, you have started it, you have not finished it. We see the work you've done, here's the data. Then it creates a more fertile ground for debate, for engagements, for discussions, and discussions that are informed, that are going to empower citizens. Because as Matron did say, and the colleagues did say, we don't want citizenship that is just howling, that says, just because I've said it, therefore it's correct. So now we are able to give people the information that this has happened, and it's not necessarily information that we get secretly. We get it from public sources, government reports, media. We get it sometimes from the speeches that the presidents have made or the cabinet have made. So this tracker, for me in South Africa right now, it's creating a different kind of narrative to say that citizens, when they demand accountability, they are not just trying to antagonize government. They're actually doing they're practicing democracy, right? And accountability is a high integral part of democracy, and the tracker is doing just that.
All right. So thank you everyone for joining me today. Mokalova, Matron, Molefe, and Yologas. You guys were fantastic, and I learned quite a bit from you. So today we were looking at the African Citizens Watch. If you'd like to find that, you can find it at www.cvoinstitute.org, and you can look for the African Citizens Watch. You'll find the different countries. Here today on the table we had South Africa, we had Zambia, Botswana, and Zimbabwe. Forgetting my own country. And we also have Malawi on that tracker. So if you'd like to know about your government and what they've promised, what they're doing well, what they're not doing well, you can look at that tracker. And I feel that also they can comment. Do I stand corrected? All right. So please do engage with us. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you again soon. Goodbye for now. My name is Nontsegele Lonzula.